for joining today. My name is Amanda Aldama, and I am from San Jose State University. I am the Spartan Youth I Promise program lead here. I've been at San Jose State kind of forever because I did my undergrad there and then working in my master's and worked there in our office for about 4 years. So Spartan for life, as they say. So thank you again for joining us today for our presentation on how to give an effective presentation at home. So a couple things, I had everyone fill out the poll as we started here. So let me go ahead and end this real quick. Admit the last couple folks in our waiting room here. All right, so I love to, whenever I start a presentation, to know who's in the room, who's around, who we can get to know at this time. So let's see, how long has everyone been with the CSU? All right, most of the folks here have been here 5 years plus. That is awesome. That is a ton of resources here for you all, especially those that, just started. Congrats, welcome to the CSU. So glad that you are joining our CSU family here. Those 1 year, 2 years, awesome. We have a lot of really diverse area here. All right, so where's everybody located, right? We got about 41% from Northern California, some from Central Valley, a lot from SoCal. Awesome, awesome, welcome. Alum of the CSU, that is awesome. So 65% of you indicated that you are an alum of the CSU that you currently work at. Some said that you attended another CSU or another university. I'm also, I think I said already, an alum of SJSU, so that's cool. Have you given a presentation over Zoom before? Okay, most of you, yes, as a sole presenter. Some co-presented, others no. Okay, so a lot of diversity here. And what are your hopes for today's presentation? So some fun Zoom features, creating an interactive environment, and other. So for those that indicated other, at this time, I want to invite you to either in the chat or on your mic, if you could share what you mean by other. So what are some of the things that you're looking for today?
Well, when I did it, I specifically put other because it was all of the above.
Gotcha. Okay, and then who is this? I'm sorry.
Linda Williams from Cal State Long Beach.
Hi, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Same here. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's see. And then we have Valerie Grace, how to address in-depth individual questions in a group setting. Okay. Gotcha. Anybody else want to share? Yes, how to battle that Zoom fatigue. That is definitely one of those things I think that we feel throughout the season, especially that quick shift to being remote, right? So definitely. All right, so we're going to touch on some of those topics here today. Now, first off, just to, I also want to pose another question to everyone in asking you all, what do you consider an effective presentation, right? That's what today is all about, talking about how we can make our presentations not just well done and beautiful looking and have all these great things, but how are they effective? How do we know that these presentations actually did what we want them to do? Same if you want to use your chat, if you want to use the mics. We have, so let's see, we have if the learning outcomes were achieved here. So we're asking about learning outcomes.
If your audience understands the information and remembers it.
Gotcha. Retains and understands. We got, I agree, your mic does sound amazing. Grab attention. Okay, person. Yeah, that's a really great point, Colette, that, when we're in person, right, we could kind of tell, right, if we're keeping eye contact, if they're on the phones, but especially with Zoom, and even if more so when they have their cameras off, we don't know, right? It's just like either they're listening to us and they're really engaged and they're just camera shy, or we're the background noise as they're playing, Animal Crossing or whatever that might be. So that's one of the things that for sure, okay. Engaging, fun, informative, right? Definitely hearing a lot of engaging. Anybody else?
How do you make it more personable?
Yeah, that's a great point. Personable as well. Making that that experience, relevant for them, for students to see themselves at your university. Great, all great stuff. So again, just to revisit our learning outcomes, making sure that students engage, that they retain, that they understand the information, they connect with us. Yes, very, very true, that we want to have that connection, grab their attention, and engage them in what this next possibility could be for their higher education. Breakout rooms for personal questions. Okay, okay. Yeah, all great stuff here. Let's save that. They are here. And go on to our next slide. Whoops. Zoom has a lot of fun features that we'll talk about. So in order to do all these things, right, in order to create that engaging environment, to have students, retain the information that we're presenting to them, that, we build that connection with them, there's something that you must do. In order to have that well done, effective presentation, you must wrap. By wrap, I mean, utilize your resources, be mindful of appearances and your audience, and plan ahead. With this version of wrapping, there is no singing required, so no worries there, unless you really want to. But starting with step one, those resources, right? What tools are at your disposal? So again, feel free on the chat or on the mic. Let's discuss this, right? Which tools have you either been utilizing during the spring with your yield events, presentations, or maybe over the summer as well? Yep. Zoom, we got Zoom webinar, Nearpod, Kahoot, PowerPoint, campus videos, polls for sure. Yeah, Q&A feature is a great one. YouTube, TikTok, nice. Instagram Live, website link. Canva, oh, Canva's a great one. So many features there. Awesome, so referring students to the different departments, Google Meetings. Yeah, Google, they released that new Rooms and Threads, so that one's pretty cool as well. A lot of different features you can utilize there. Google Chat, Virtual tours, awesome. Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of different resources that you all have been using, a lot of different things that you have been putting together and sharing with students throughout this time. Campus partners and professionals, definitely, like financial aid, working off those partnerships that you have, building those connections for the students as well. All great stuff. Thank you for sharing. So diving into this a little bit more, right? We talked about Zoom. We talked about, maybe if you have, depending on your campus, if you have the meeting license or the webinar license, that would, be a different type of presentation. There are different features that you have available to you. Some of you mentioned YouTube, right? So whether that is you do a presentation and then you post the video, that recording of it, and share it on your YouTube page, or maybe you utilize YouTube as a live streaming feature, right? You have a premiere date that you build up to, or you're like, we're going live at this time, and students go to your channel. So a lot of different things that you can do with YouTube. You can create different playlists as well. So talking about our campus partners, right? To be able to work with them, maybe they have their own YouTube pages as well. You have your page and the different playlists, right? Or the playlist of College of Engineering or Education or Science and whatever videos they have, or maybe student involvement, student life, different things of that nature. So when students go to your page, they see all these different aspects of what it means to be a student at your school. Instagram Live, yeah, definitely another great way to go live, to reach students through social media. Instagram's where a lot of students are at, to be able to connect with them there, have them follow, and be able to share information with them in that mode as well. There's also, to consider the look of your presentation, right? So whether maybe your university has a set type of template that you need to use, or maybe it's just like as long as it looks nice, as long as it's pretty, there's a lot of different resources for you, whether that is in the Google templates or websites like Slides Carnival that has some really great features where you can download templates in either a Google Slides format or a PowerPoint format. Now, there's also a tool that I really love to use. I used it a lot this past year. It's called Nearpod. Now, Nearpod, I'll talk a little bit more about it in the next couple slides, but it's a great way to incorporate Google Slides, different interactive components, and track the retention of students. Kahoot is another one as well. I think a lot of people mention it in the chat, so I'm not going to go too into it other than that it is a service that you can use that previously was just limited to like quizzes and surveys. But now they, with a subscription, you can add games, you can add other features as well to engage. The great thing that I love about Nearpod and Kahoot is, yes, you can use that platform to make your own, but there's also ways where you can collaborate with other folks if there's other topics of interest, right? So there's a lot of great things there. And then, of course, as mentioned by many of you, that collaboration, that teamwork, working with your campus partners, working with your colleagues in your office. Maybe it's something where you're co-presenting where, yeah, you both know the information thoroughly, but maybe what helps that presentation is that dynamic, that back and forth, being able to engage with someone, bounce ideas off of, and really give two different perspectives there for that presentation for the students, for those family members that are joining in on you for that presentation. And again, working with your campus partners. We'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide here. All right, so utilizing your resources, what does this also include? So again, we mentioned, maybe there's templates provided by your university already, so you are limited to what templates are available there, or there's free software that's available. So like the Slides Carnival, there is other software like Nearpod. There's another one that I use, not necessarily for recruitment, more for the different side of my program, but it's called Flipgrid. Basically, it's like an Instagram that's private. It's just for your students, for your class, for your cohort that you are working with. So there's a multitude of free tools out there, especially with the current situation right now of COVID-19, this pandemic. A lot of companies are saying, hey, if you want to utilize our tools, we'll make it free for this certain amount of time for you to be able to experience what that is like. There's that CARES funding as well, where there's some companies where say, hey, you could use CARES funding for us. So definitely it's a conversation that you want to have with your managers on especially if you do have to purchase anything, but there's a lot of great free tools out there as well. Another thing you want to do is consider your audience, right? So we'll talk about this a little bit more in the next couple slides, but really think about when you're deciding what tools you're going to use, especially if it's something that's super interactive. Are you working with someone, talking with someone who maybe isn't as tech savvy, or where that might not be as the best way to communicate that information with them? So again, always try and feel out what that's going to be and meet your audience where they're at, because there's no like one same audience. And then, of course, while we are not on the road, we can definitely still use our recruitment materials. So right now behind me, I have my banner here for San Jose State, just because I have a bunch of stuff on my wall in my kitchen, so it's not something, really want in the background. But, if you don't have a virtual background, for example, or a space in your house to really present, we all have tablecloths. We can hang those up, have our school logos right behind us. A lot of great things you could do there. Now, the other thing you want to consider is the look of the presentation. So not sure if it's just noticing the font came out a little bit weird on that, so my apologies there. When I send this out, I'll fix that up for you. But really that look of the presentation, right? So is this presentation supposed to be very formal? Is it supposed to be fun? Is it supposed to, what is it that you want it to look at? So like with this presentation particularly, I took like this comic book strip, because I want to have that different type of approach, right? You could use different images, different graphics, so be mindful of what you're using there. So especially if you are having a lot of text on the page, for example, if you're going to have a big image, decide where you're going to put that placement, where there's not a lot of overlap and it's really not difficult to read, right? You also want to be mindful of the fonts that you're using. So I know for some of us, our universities provide a font already, so there can be that, but you also want to be mindful of folks in terms of like maybe those that have dyslexia or something else, that some fonts are difficult to read. So you want to have it as accessible as possible and easy for folks to be able to, see that information. Videos. So with videos, I did put a little star next to that because, we do have different campus videos. Some of you mentioned, maybe it's a video linking to a resource or another department, but you always want to make sure you test out those videos, that maybe you optimize the sound, the video quality on Zoom. So there's a little feature, you may already be familiar with this, but on your bar here, there's a more with 3 dots, and it has a feature where it says share computer sound and optimize share for full video clip. So this is something that you are going to want to click. Yes, thank you so much. I was about to say that as well. Captions. So if there are captions available, that is another thing that you might want to consider using, right? To have this video be more accessible, have your presentation be more accessible as well. And especially when you're designing this look, right? When you're designing what you want this presentation to look like, what you want it to include, what tools you're going to use, you want to think about, what is your goal with this presentation? What are you hoping that students or parents get out of this presentation? Is it just, to learn more about your school? Is it the application process? Is it that you're introducing them to a resource, a campus department? Whatever that might be, that's going to really play into this next part of, building those relationships and working with your campus partners. So, we've had these relationships that we built throughout our time here, and just because we're virtual, those relationships don't go away. We can still work with each other in terms of, co-presenting or doing a panel, really having that opportunity to present to students in a way that facilitates that sense of belonging, that connection to campus. Now, this can either be through having a guest speaker come in, or having a full-on co-host, or maybe doing a panel. One thing that we did as well is have different sessions with the colleges, right? So maybe like hosting with, all right, this week we're going to feature our College of Engineering. Next week we're going to feature our College of Science, our College of Health and Human Sciences, Humanities and Arts, whatever that might be, because then you're getting to tailor your presentations to your audience, because again, not all audiences are going to be the same. Just like when we're presenting in person, right? You're not using the exact same speech. You're not using the exact same examples or what have you, because you want to make sure that you're meeting your audience where they're at, that you are engaging with them in a way that is engaging to them, right? And the other great part about partnering with your campus partners is you get to really maximize your efforts. So one example of this I want to share is during the spring when we had our virtual open house, right? We decided to do this week-long that turned into a month-long series of videos and webinars that we partnered with a lot of different partners on campus, the colleges, the deans, student organizations, you name it. And that not only one, yeah, we had a lot of work to do, but it shared the load and it got a lot of students involved. It was an opportunity to really say, these departments, they wanted to reach out to their students, so we both got to come at it that way, to both be able to maximize the efforts and have the best return possible on those efforts as well. You want to make sure that you're working as efficient as possible right now, especially with all of these Zooms, because the other thing, slight detour here, and mentioned earlier in the chat, is that Zoom fatigue, right? We have all these different presentations. We have, we're so used to when we're on the road, like, all right, I could set in this cushion time because I need to travel, I need to eat. But sometimes when we're at home, that can get lost, right? We're like, oh, I don't have to travel anywhere. I'm just sitting in my living room, my kitchen. I could have this back-to-back presentation and sit in one spot from, 9 to 4. No. You need that time to rest. You need that time to step away, to have those breaks, and really recharge for yourself to have the most efficient presentation as possible, to be as present as possible for the audience that you are working with. So Zoom, right? We're on Zoom right now. So some of the features that Zoom has, some you might be familiar with already. We're using some right now, right? Is thinking about what type of presentation you're going to want to have. So I think this also will depend on the licensing that your office has, whether this is a meeting license or a webinar license. There are differences in both of those. So for some meetings, I know for us, our meeting capacity is 300. It varies, it can vary. There's different packages there. For the webinars, it can be, 1,000 or so, but it's a different environment that you're setting up, right? If you want to be able to engage and, you know, see everybody's faces, have someone be able to just chime in on the mic or chime in on the chat, whatever that might be, and it's, you know, less than whatever that capacity is, meetings might be what you're looking for, to have a little bit more engagement, to have that opportunity for folks to be able to, you know, annotate on the screen, to be able to, you know, really engage with you in that way. Now, the other thing with webinars is you are presenting, but there's a little bit less in terms of how much the audience is engaging with you. So there is that Q&A feature where they can be able to put their questions into a very organized way in that manner, but you know, folks can't just hop on the mic. You have to give them permission in that way, or permission to turn on their video. So really just kind of thinking about what type of environment you want to set up, what your topic is, that can also change that, as well as if you're presenting by yourself or with other folks, because maybe, you know, if it's a really hot topic, right? Like we did one on, you know, financial aid and living on campus, especially in this time, right? You have to consider having multiple folks on that call. So as you're presenting, maybe someone else is manning the chat to be able to address those questions as quickly as possible. So we do have, speaking of questions, we have a couple questions here in the chat. That's improves. Gotcha. Okay. So we have a question on accessibility. So I think one of the best ways to handle that is a lot of our campuses have accessibility education departments on it. So some it's like the disability services, us, it's called accessible education. Really talk with them. So if you're unsure about if something is truly accessible or how to be able to best serve a student's needs, reach out to folks who, you know, are in that department. They could be able to give you tips and strategies, maybe even be on that call with you to help with that process. So that's where I would definitely refer you to look for those recommendations there. Now I know for some captions is included, but for others it might be just reading through Zoom's thing, there might be a fee with that. So that could be back to something with your licensing. But I would especially talk with your accessibility office on campus to see what resources they can have as well for you. I think we had a question on the mic as well, or
more question on the technology that you mentioned, all the different resources that are out there, and it was a question by Mark actually, and I think it's pretty good in the sense that have some of those resources been vetted through your IT? Or do you just kind of use them and then ask for forgiveness if they find out later? Like, because, you know, sometimes IT definitely wants to vet some of the software that we use.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, you know, it really depends, right? So what I personally like to do is whenever I'm hosting a presentation, I like to have the registration feature on. So that way, one, if students need some sort of accommodation there, that way they can be able to express that so I can plan ahead. Now, if there's nothing expressed, and honestly, probably not the best way, but I'll go ahead and do it. And if they come forward and say, I need this help, then we'll find that help for them, right? At the end of the day, we want to make sure this information is available to them in the way that's accessible to them. But part of that is also that planning ahead, right? And seeing and having those opportunities for folks to be able to say, I need this support. Now, I know there's some of it like Zoom, like the closed captioning, that's already taken care of. Now with Nearpod, to be completely transparent, I will double check on that and get back to you and see if there is anything. I know there isn't necessarily a partnership with our university on that. It's one of those resources I kind of looked up and just been utilizing, but that's definitely something I will get back to you when I send out the presentation. So thank you for asking that as well. Really good point. We've got another message here. Captions, videos. Yeah, definitely. Great. Okay, so let's see. On that note, moving straight along to those chats and Q&A, right? So having folks be able to engage with you through the chats, through the question and answer feature, you know, through this, the great thing about it is you don't have to, it's not limited to just the text, right? You could be able to send files, images as well. You could be able to save those chats. That way the transcript is available. And I have mine set up where it automatically saves and downloads to my computer after every Zoom. So that way, if there's something that maybe I missed because, you know, I'm, you know, presenting while looking at the chat at the same time, I can be able to go back and follow up with those folks to say, hey, you know, you had this question, here's what was going, here's that response, right? Now, yeah, so you could share images, documents, PDFs, so that's one thing there. Screen sharing, we talked about that, but one great thing that you can do as well is it has a feature called Whiteboard, where let's say you're trying to get collaboration, right? You're trying to get folks to be able to see those ideas, not just talk about them or read them in the chat. You can use the Whiteboard feature where it will come up on your screen, and just like if we're in person, right, with a whiteboard, you could be able to annotate on it, draw on it, and save that image into your documents as well, and be able to send it out later, whatever you would like to do with that, or save it for your notes. Polls, so several of you mentioned that earlier as well. We're using whiteboards a few slides ago, so I was not, I just kind of made it look like a whiteboard, but that's essentially what it will look like. It will be the white screen, and I can show it later at the end of the presentation exactly what that will look like, but it's a really great feature that you can use as well to get that live collaboration going on your screen. Now with the polls, as some of you mentioned earlier, we did some today, that you do want to create those, or you will create those in your web browser. And you'd access them here. You could be able to share those results with folks. You could set them where you see everyone's name or it's anonymous. I like to keep it in the names because, especially when I'm working with my students, my cohort of students, is when I could download later the report and see, okay, who responded to what, who's having difficulty with this area, or who is not too familiar with this, or who needs a little bit more information on whatever that question happens to be. So again, follow up with them. I think following up is, especially with our Zoom presentations, is going to be key at this time. You could set it to single or multiple choice, and we talked about sharing the results live. Breakout rooms was discussed as well. So I love using breakout rooms. Sometimes it really depends, right? So one example is over the summer, I led a summer program where we had a virtual resource fair. Now in person, right, this event, think about a resource fair. You're at tables all around, students can go freely, and great stuff, right? Connections, all that. Now, because we couldn't do that this year, what that looked like this year was a Zoom presentation with breakout rooms. Now, in order to make sure students can, one, be able to go to the resource that they're interested in and get that information, that required some prep to see, okay, registration. Which resources are you interested in? These are the folks that are going to be here. What are your top 3? Some pre-assigning, right? So pre-assigning you can be able to do in Zoom on the browser. So if you are going to be hosting something on a specific topic, right, you're going to have multiple speakers, you can be able to get those students' email addresses and pre-assign them to a room that speaker is going to be in. You could also have it random if there's really, if you're using it just to have conversations and say, okay, let's talk about this in small groups, hit random, and then students are in other groups. But I really like using the pre-assigned feature. The one caveat that I would say with that is when you are having students utilize that, and this is in, thank you for that question. So it's in meetings, it's not available in webinar, it is only in the meetings. When you're using the pre-assigned breakout rooms, you will want to authenticate your users or limit the domains, because if a student logs in with a different domain than the email that you had assigned them to the room with, when you break out into those rooms, they're not going to be assigned, and then you're going to have to manually assign. Learn that the hard way. So that's just one thing to keep in mind as you're doing this. So with both of those features, think about how you want to utilize it. Think about how you want folks to be able to either engage with your speakers, engage with each other, and see what is available there. You can broadcast to those rooms as well, different messages, those questions that you want them to work on, different files. And then annotate, we showed that example earlier where you could be able to type right on your slides. You could be able to, let's look here, utilize the mouse to be able to really focus on one area. You can draw on one's particular part. You could be able to put a stamp, because I love presenting with you all. Spotlight, a lot of different features that you can utilize here to really focus on a particular part of your presentation, because, like when we're in person, right, you could be able to use your clicker, the pointer, or be able to physically, like, this is what I want you to focus on, where that's not really as doable on the screen, right? So utilizing that annotate feature, that mouse, those highlight spotlights can really help in focusing on, this is what I'm talking about right now, and this is what I want you to pay attention to. Nearpod. So Nearpod, that was a resource we discussed earlier. It has a lot of great tools in terms of you can link it directly to your Zoom, or you can have a self-paced offline module for students where it's not something that you're all online at the same time, where they go in, you kind of post it and they go in, when it's feasible for them. They could be able to do it at that time. So that is a possibility that you have. Now with Nearpod, I will say there is a free version, but for some of the features, especially if you're having a larger audience with the live version, those are paid. So as mentioned earlier, before you do pay for anything, check with those other departments, see if this is really a tool that is going to be beneficial for you to utilize. Some of those tools that it includes is it's integrated to Google Slides. So you can make it right through your Google Slides, incorporate those features like the games, the videos, and so forth. PDFs, websites that are clickable on here, different games such as a match game. You could do different quizzes. You can do a race game. So if you're doing a live presentation, right, you want to see how many students retain that information. You have the quiz, and then they have like these little figurines that are climbing a hill, and then each question they get right, they're winning the race towards the end to say, one, give them the idea of like, okay, maybe I have more questions on this area. And two, giving you the idea of like, okay, nobody got that question right. Let me rephrase this in a different way for students. As well as some of the other features it has is tours. You can integrate a Twitter live stream, as well as if any of your campuses use the Remind app, it's like a texting app to be able to send students notifications. You can send it through there in Google Classroom as well. So a lot of different features that you can be able to tie it to another platform to really engage with folks. So I'm going to share this video so you can see a little bit more about it, a little bit more about what that looks like here.
Introducing Nearpod, an award-winning student engagement platform that comes with thousands of ready-to-run interactive K-12 lessons. Nearpod is a platform that easily allows teachers to create, download, and teach interactive lessons across all student devices, including Chromebooks, iPads, iPhones, and Android devices. Teachers can easily upload their existing PowerPoints, PDFs, Google Slides, and Sways, and convert them into interactive Nearpod lessons by adding engaging activities like quizzes, polls, draw-its, open-ended questions, fill-in-the-blanks games, and 3D objects. With Nearpod VR, teachers can take their students on a virtual field trip anywhere in the world. Teachers launch a live lesson. Students enter a lesson code, and the lesson is synced to all student devices. Teachers can also launch student-paced lessons, which allow students to complete a lesson on their own time, wherever they are. Teachers get real-time feedback on student understanding and can access post-lesson reports to assess individual and class performance. Nearpod also has a library of thousands of ready-to-run, standards-aligned K-12 lessons across all subjects from a curated list of trusted publishers. All lessons are editable and customizable to meet the needs of individual teachers and students. Nearpod is the most comprehensive student engagement platform that your students will love.
So several different tools again that you can utilize there through Nearpod if it does work for your campus. Again, there's multiple other types, right? There's Buncee, there's Kahoot, there's the list can go on, but I think you really got to do that research and see what is going to work best for you, for your campus, and maybe even talk with your IT department. So one of the things that I know our campus is working on, especially with large scale events, right, and presentations, is since this is not just unique to our department, this is something that is going on campus-wide. A lot of our departments are trying to adapt, that some universities might be purchasing certain software. So that could, relieve your budget, that could make something available to you that you might not even know was there. So maybe check with your IT department as well to see what other resources, software, even hardware is available for you to utilize during this time. So a couple questions I want to address in the chat before we move forward. So I'm not really talking about the application in this presentation, but I know that there is an application workshop. We're also using, Zoom for that. Okay, so it's a separate question. Okay, so moving right along to our step 2 of the wrap. appearances, and audiences. So I do want to again invite you to either on the chat or through your mic, share, how do you present? Do you present on camera or off camera? Utilize the poll here as well. Alrighty, so far it is looking like the majority of you, almost 80%, present on camera. No one presents off camera. And 21% said it depends. So for our folks that said it depends, what does it depend on for you?
When I meet with students, I like to ask them if they feel comfortable with me having my camera on or off, because sometimes they have it off, and then I kind of put that out there just to make them feel more comfortable when we meet.
Yeah, that's a really great point as well. You want to make sure that you're setting that environment that is most comfortable for them, right? You're that, they're reaching out to you, and yeah, there's that camera, but maybe they don't want to be on camera. So that's a good point as well. How about for other folks with the it depends?
I also do what Rachel does, but then I also ask if they feel comfortable just talking on the phone, because I know it's just some sort of conversation is really important right now. And whether it's via email that they want to continue chatting or try to use a different means of, I guess, platform to have some sort of conversation and help them out with whatever is being talked about.
Yeah, that's a really great point too, right? Meeting them on the phone. We have these devices not just for the Zoom app, but to be able to call folks and be able to, have those longer conversations. Maybe folks don't have internet where they're at. Maybe their internet connection isn't very strong, so Zoom doesn't work for them. So you'd want to, again, meet them where they're at, have those that information accessible for them, available to be able to present and retain and engage with. But anybody else? Great. Thank you so much for sharing. So one thing that does come to mind, so when you talk with students and they have their cameras on, they're agreeable, if there is that availability to have that internet connection, then you do want to have your cameras on. So it's great to see that a lot of you, that when you are presenting, you have those cameras on, because there's those first impressions, right? You are literally that first face they see of the university. You are that, maybe even that very first interaction they have with your university. So you'd want to not just be that voice behind the screen, but be that person, be personal, be engaging, and be, someone they could be able to connect with, talk with, and be able to ask those questions of. You also want to try and dress to impress, even if it is just from the top up, be in your PJ shorts, if that's what you want to do, but try and have, if not like your office shirt or just like something nice, maybe to be able to really represent, not just yourself, but your university, because yes, we might be at home, but we're still working, right? We're still representing our office, our department, our school as well. And, maybe it's not just the students, but it's also the parents that are on there as well. And they're thinking, whatever they might be thinking. So you do want to try and dress to impress, at least from the top up, and create that welcoming environment. So part of that is those opening questions. Like Rachel said, do you feel comfortable having your camera on, or would you prefer the camera off? Maybe it is a Wi-Fi issue where their camera's on and it gets spotty every time. So it's easier to just have the camera off. Or maybe, they don't have really strong internet at all and they're like, can you just talk on the phone? Whatever that might be, meet their students where they're at. Talk about what that is going to be best for them to engage with them. Other things you want to be mindful of, so we talked about, right, that internet connection. So where you are in the house, maybe, or, you know, there's one part of where you live where the internet's really strong, but certain time of day, you know, whoever you live with is there and you can't really do your presentations there. So really being mindful of, you know, where you are in terms of that connection, how you're able to, you know, how strong your connection for your presentation will be. Being aware of your housemates, those that you live with. So, you know, just kind of be respectful of each other. So especially if others are also working remotely, working from home, you know, maybe they got a meeting or you got a meeting, or maybe there's, you have kids, right? And it's kind of like that trade-off, like, can you watch them from this time because I'm going to present at this time? Or, you know, really having those conversations with your family or whoever you live with to be able to have as minimal background distractions as possible. So as minimal background noise, you know, especially I know like a lot of times, speaking for myself, I have to work in the kitchen because that's where the strongest internet connection is, but I got to be mindful of, okay, if someone's got to eat, right, I need to, you know, figure out if they're going to use the microwave, they're going to use whatever that is, have those conversations of, I'm going to be in here at this time, let's try and schedule, or let's try and work this out, or, you know, whatever that might be, you work it out, you coordinate with those that you're living with. And, you know, your background guests. So sometimes, you know, folks will have pets drop in, which can be a great conversation starter. I will say it's a lot of great conversations with students, but, you know, maybe you have a relative or a roommate or something that walks by that, you know, isn't really appropriate to be in your background. So things to be mindful of as well. And the way you want to have those conversations is, again, taking that time and really being considerate of each other. So whether that starts off with something like, would it be all right if I worked in the kitchen for a few hours? Or I have a presentation at noon, can you watch the kids from 11:30 to 1:30? Or my favorite, I'm going to be on camera from 1 to 2. So if you're going to walk by, can you wear pants, please? So a lot of different things that you want to be mindful of in the appearances of your presentations, because, you know, even though we're not in person, or even rather I should say, especially because we're not in person, it's just this one screen that folks are looking at, that attention to detail, if you're on camera, people will notice just about everything. Now, our next big concept I definitely want to talk about is something I mentioned a little bit earlier, but not all audiences are the same, right? You want to tailor your presentations. You want to tailor the tools that you're using, as well as how you're engaging with those folks. So making that accessible again, making it available for them, focusing on language as well. So I had a couple of presentations, or rather appointments, scheduled over the spring where there's a language barrier that, you know, I didn't speak the language and it was a little bit hard to communicate. So one thing that, you know, was good for us is we had this live chat that was going on, be able to be like, hey, can someone else hop in this conversation? Because I want to make sure that the student gets, you know, the information presented to them in the way that's going to be best for them, right? I don't want to, you know, give them only half information. I want them to be able to get what they need from this meeting. We talked about closed captioning earlier, but something you might also want to be aware of, you know, especially that we were aware of in our in-person presentations, is there's still, you know, auditory, visual, and hands-on learners. So if you have, yes, definitely, oh, stay away from those windows in the back, it gives that creepy glow. But you have those different types of learners, right? So you have folks that, and when you're presenting and you're speaking through everything, you know, they're really auditory learners, so just hearing everything, great, good. Others, they do need those visuals. They need that example. They need to see it on the screen. And some folks, you know, it's better with that hands-on. So, you know, with Zoom, there is that remote control feature, or you can have whoever you're meeting with, especially if it's like a small group, you know, maybe share their screen and they walk through where they have the questions on, so you can go through it instead of just verbally explaining. They get to be able to actually practice that and get that live feedback from you there. So being mindful of those different learning styles and trying to be able to meet those styles and be able to work with folks, and follow up. Follow up is huge. It is key, whether that be, you know, a survey at the end, or there's a game at the end of your presentation, or even simply just an email that comes after that conversation of like, hey, it was great to meet you. Here's everything that we talked about. Let me know if you have any questions, because there most likely can be questions. And, you know, sometimes even for myself, right, I'm sitting in the presentation and maybe you don't catch everything, or something isn't quite the way that you wrote it down or thought it was. So having that email conversation, having that follow-up allows a student to really be able to, you know, have that information on hand for themselves and directly follow up with that particular issue. Yes, okay. Moving on to almost the end here of step 3 of planning ahead. So a question I want to pose to the group to discuss is, how many of you, you know, along those conversations of registration, right? If you use registration or if you not use registration. There's not a poll for this. More along the lines of just kind of like the discussion, like the benefits of using that registration versus not. Okay, got a couple. This is use registration. Yes, collecting that data. Safety, of course. Awesome, okay. So we'll move right along here. Custom questions. Yes, I love those custom questions. So with registration, there are so many benefits that can come with that, right? You can be able to make that chat a little bit more secure. You can be able to limit the domains. So you could be able to, especially like if you're working with a particular school district, you can limit to that class. You could, that way there's no Zoom bombing. You can, there's a ton of stuff that you can do. One of the things mentioned here in the chat is those custom questions. So to be able to collect that information that you're looking for, right? To be able to collect their questions in advance, to be able to, you know, email and name are already there, but maybe phone number as well. So if either your school has a calling campaign, your office has a calling campaign, or maybe you have the capability to be able to text students, or you know, utilize another platform to text them or message them, you know, you want to be able to utilize that to get that information that you need to engage with those folks. You can, the other thing with registration, now, especially if you're using like a webinar as well, is you could be able to put like speaker notes. You could be able to give folks a little bit more insight into what your presentation is going to be about. Not just like, oh, I'm talking about, you know, admission, but like, oh, so-and-so from this office who is also an alum who has worked here for, you know, give that extra credibility to your presentation, right? Give that extra connection, that personalness to those presentations for folks to be able to see as they're registering. And of course, collecting data. That is, I think, the huge part, especially since, you know, we're not in person. We don't have those contact cards with us at the resource fairs. So this is one way where we could be able to, one, collect that data of who was in our presentation. But one thing that I like to do as well is put it in the spreadsheet to be able to start to track, okay, particularly for my program, we have multiple types of presentations, not just the admissions. So to be able to track and see, okay, which type of presentations did they join? When did they join? How involved were they? Did they attend this event? Did they attend that? And with downloading those spreadsheets, that really helps you to be able with that, to be able to utilize those tracking and, you know, report season coming up. So to be able to work for that together. And that process can be really easy again. So having that registration process, you know, it also sends them a confirmation email, which is great because, you know, you could set it up where students get reminders like the day before. And then, of course, that follow-up as well, the opportunity to re-engage with students, re-engage with folks, and, you know, maintain that energy, maintain that interest as well. Let's see, registration. Yes, and of course, the accommodations as well. Oh, thank you. Alrighty, so at this time, I do want to ask if there are any questions, if anyone does have any questions about what was presented, maybe something I barely touched on that you want to go into more depth about, anything at all. Oh no. Speaking about strong internet connection. Can you hear me now? Yes? Awesome. Thank you. All right, are there any questions? Or maybe even any feedback of or tools or strategies that you've used that you feel you'd want to share as well. I definitely want to open it up. I think especially right now, and always too, right? We want to collaborate. I think that's one of the great things about the CSU family is we support each other. We want to be able to encourage and help each other along the way, because whether a student is attending our CSU or your CSU, they're part of the CSU, right? So we want to be able to help each other with this process. What software did I use for the presentation? So I downloaded a template from Slides Carnival, and then I used Google Slides. And that one, I like Google Slides because at first I was thinking about incorporating some Nearpod into here so you could see what that is like live, because it's directly integrated. But for time's sake, I did avoid that today. But just Slides Carnival and Google Slides. One of the great things about that one is it has both templates for Google Slides or PowerPoint. Sorry all, the internet cut out before I could share that I set up this presentation to allow you to explore the measurement tools in Nearpod and Kahoot. So when you get the links for the slides, go ahead and check that out to see all the activities that are available there for you. Starting off first with just some helpful links for tools and tech, so just reminders where to look for support for Zoom, where to see for Nearpod, as well as Kahoot, Slides Carnival that I utilized, Google Forms is great for assessment, and then some other reminders about IT and other services that can be available on your campus. And the next couple slides do talk about some examples that are available for you, so you can click on that link there to access the Nearpod, starting with the fill in the blank. The fill in the blank allows you to see students' retention of the information presented by having a statement that you place in there and a word bank where they have to drag the words over to the correct area. Matching pairs is similar to that match game that you play with the cards where you're trying to match the two images, where you could set it up using images or words or phrases. So for this activity, I set it up in terms of information. So relating the Zoom meeting and the Zoom webinar to their features. The next part, time to climb, that's that fun, I like to think of like the funner version of the quiz where you actually get to see your progress there. Followed by the collaborate feature, which is a Q&A type feature where students can write their question on the board and you could be able to comment, they could put pictures, other students can like their comments as well to be able to show that maybe that's a question that they have as well, that it's something that's popular amongst the group. You're going to see the link for Kahoot there as well, so you can use that game pin to access that, and those Kahoot questions are for, you could do it for a survey, you could do it like a trivia activity. I usually like to do one where I have Spartan trivia for students, or I'll have, especially with the admissions presentations, the dates and deadlines for students to be able to select the correct answers there. And then this last part here is just the Slides Carnival, so where I got the slides from. So again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My email is there, and have a good rest of your day.